The Albany Empire pregame show continues to roll on. We are joined by Andrew Santillo. The full Albany broadcast team is here. So we've got so much news going on in the NAL. We're kind of going to stay away from that a little bit. I'm sure our YouTube comments will be more than happy to share that news with us. We're just going to focus here on the game between Albany and Orlando. Before the teams actually kick off, I think we got to address the storyline of the bye week. Albany's coming off a bye week. Do you see that playing a factor, if at all, in a game like this?
I mean, I don't really. I mean, I think if anything, it's a positive. I mean, if you look at Albany's season, I mean, they lost the first game at home, then they won 4 in a row, then they lost 3. Now they've won a couple. So, if anything, a bye this late in the year, I think can only help you because you got guys who, I mean, especially, offensive, defensive line and Ironman guys who've been going, playing on both sides of the football. So a little bit of break at this time of the year, I don't think is the worst thing. I think even Coach Manas would say, it gives him a chance to kind of review the tape, if you will, look around, is this the team he wants to take into the playoffs? Are there pieces to be added? Are there, is this where, are you, as every coach says, are you hitting the high point of your season as you enter the playoffs? And, the Empire have a playoff spot, which they clinched. So they have a seat at the table to defend their 2021 championship. So I think a bye this late in the season actually, I think, will be a benefit because it gives the guys kind of a break, from that grinding, season, week in, week out, traveling, playing at home. You get a little bit of time off and come back hungry, this weekend.
You mentioned the Empire clinching that bye week, and it's so interesting. Clinching the playoff spot during the bye week, which is always a bizarre thing to celebrate when you're watching someone else play. The theme, I think, for this game is still a home playoff game, even though Orlando's in an off season, we'll call it, of not the year they wanted. But it seems as if win and hope for a Carolina loss. That's the goal, not just a home playoff game, but have home field advantage throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you've seen, with the injury to Jonathan Bain, the quarterback for the Cobras. When we talked before the last home game, you're thinking, okay, can they get the 2 seed? Now there's a scenario, a very likely scenario, or at least a possible scenario that they could clinch that number 1 seed, which obviously is where you want to be. You want to host these games. This is what happened last year. They were able to host the semifinal and the championship. So they're defending the championship. Obviously, they want to play the semifinal game at home. They want to play the championship game at home. But I think they kind of want to roll, into the playoffs, right? So, they've won a couple of games in a row now, finish out with 2 teams that are not headed to the postseason. Got Orlando and San Antonio. So I think, this is potentially, a kind of a trap game, if you will, even though I don't think Coach Manas lets the guys think that way, because you're playing a team that's lost 4 straight games. They're not in the playoff position. So you may be thinking, okay, we're kind of riding high at this point. And, you've won a few games in a row. But again, I think this group is hungry to repeat, hungry to get there, hungry to put themselves in the best position to repeat as champions. So I don't see this being a trap game, but this could be, it has the scenario set up to be a type of a trap game. Orlando's got a lot of pieces out of place in terms of quarterbacks and, again, lost 4 games in a row. So we'll see what happens. I think, you're playing at home. The home crowd will be there. So I think everybody will be revved up for this one. And so, I think the Empire are going to play well. And if they play well, they should do pretty well against Orlando.
On our most recent home broadcast, I had mentioned during the broadcast, and by the way, he's coming up later in the pregame show, so be nice to him, Trayvon Shorts. We had said that performance by him out of the backfield is the best performance by any running back in the history of the Empire at home. Because of how good he played in that most recent home game, could you see that potentially being a new way for this offense to focus more on Shorts getting the football out of the backfield?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, he obviously is making his presence felt on both sides of the field. He's a big piece on the defense, but this has been a new wrinkle over the last few weeks, giving it to Shorts. And he's been able to, he's got, 3 touchdowns rushing, but he's got almost 100 yards. But I also think he really complements Sam Castronova's ability to run the football as well. I mean, if you look at the Empire, they have 17 rushing touchdowns. Last year, I think they may have had 4 or 5 the whole season. I mean, this is really a team now that looks to run the football in certain scenarios. And I think Sam Castronova, the starting quarterback, is the league's leading rusher and league's leading rushing touchdown scorer. So with him and Shorts, they really do have that ability to run the football, which, further diversifies this offense. And so it makes it harder to game plan. But you've seen Shorts' ability. I mean, he's 6'1", 230, but he's really got the ability to hit the holes and kind of make big gains on teams because, you're traditionally in this league looking for passing plays, so if you can hit them on a play where they think you're passing, Shorts has been able to rip off some big gains.
It's fun for us, for broadcasters, to talk about the storylines involving Sam Castronova, but we are at this point now in mid-July where I know he's good, but there are sometimes I don't even know who he is. And what I mean by that is that week 1, he doesn't start. He gets benched on the road against a San Antonio team that hadn't won a game at that point. You just listed off all of his stats. Do you have a feel yet of who Sam Castronova is as a quarterback in comparison to the other quarterbacks in the league?
I mean, I think, it is interesting. I mean, there's been so many injuries around the league in terms of the quarterback position. We've seen it. Almost every team has had a quarterback go down or had to shuffle. Even Sam got knocked out of a game. And like you said, he was benched in one of the games. But yeah, it is remarkable to see a guy who's thrown for 45 touchdowns and rushed for 11 touchdowns. I mean, he's really had some really good performances, especially at home. I think, he's kind of like a gritty type of quarterback. He's not a guy who kind of just stays in the pocket and was going to throw 30 to 40 times a game. I mean, he's not afraid, and we've seen it, to put his head down. If things break down, he's got a little bit of mobility to him, which I think has made him more effective. And his ability to run the football, I think, has opened up also passing, situations for them because, he, like I said, he's got 11 touchdowns rushing, which leads the league, and then almost 50 touchdowns passing. So, I mean, I think he's really almost thrust himself into that conversation for MVP, as strange as it sounds, because Jonathan Bain had kind of lapped the field. And if quarterbacks are traditionally the players who are going to get that love when you're talking about an MVP. I mean, we could talk about Darius Prince all day and how he leads the league in receiving yards and receptions and receiving touchdowns. But I think Sam has really, to your point, I think we maybe haven't seen his best yet. And, we came into the league, into the season, not really knowing. We saw him last year when he came as an opposing player. When he played with Carolina, he came and played against Albany in Albany. So, we didn't really know what to make of him. And like you said, he wasn't the starter at the start of the year, but he's really, I think, kind of settled in, as the starter. And I think he kind of takes on the personality of this team, if you will. I mean, it's a gritty team. Again, they lost 3 games. Kind of everyone had them in the league. Everyone around the league had them dead and buried, when they were, when they went on that 3-game losing streak to drop to 4-4. But I think you've seen how Sam's kind of able to, put things together when he really needs to.
A win in this matchup against Orlando has put Albany in a really good spot for a home playoff game. There's no doubt there. But you mentioned to me right before we hit record, guys, I've got to hear more about this doomsday scenario you've heard of. Do you see this potentially playing out? And for those that don't know about, now that Mike Cord is not in the room in Levac, that if Carolina and Jacksonville play next week and decide actually we're not going to take the field or tie, both of those teams following a victory this week would both have home playoff games. What do you make of this, like, as Levac's called it before, the Raiders-Chargers scenario that could play out next week?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, it's one of those things where, I think, again, us in the media, we like to talk about it because it gives you all these like, whoa, will they do this? Won't they do this? What happens if they do this? Should it be allowed? Should the referees stop it? Or, should they force the teams to play? So I think it's a lot of like conjecture and stuff. I mean, I think, should Albany lose this game this week? I think, it would probably be, it would make the most sense, for those teams to kind of either try to figure out a way to tie so they could both host semifinals. Do I think it's going to get to that point? I don't. I hope it doesn't, obviously, because then like you mentioned with the NFL situation, you start talking about like integrity of the league and, is it, you talk about all those crazy scenarios. And I know for the league, I'm sure would just hope everyone goes out and tries to win every game they're playing because then they don't have to deal with those type of conversations. So I don't see that happening, but I mean, I guess if Albany does lose this week, it's a very, it's a situation, it's something that I'm sure people are going to be discussing.
Kickoff set for 7:00 on YouTube. The Albany Empire take on the Orlando Predators. I'll see you in a few hours here, Andrew Santillo. Enjoy the broadcast, and we'll talk.
It's white out
and pink out we got going on. So
pink?
I know,
yeah,
right? You and I both got the white shirts when we were talking right now, but we could have potentially some pink in our wardrobe when you see us up in the, I'll call it the rafters of MVP Arena.